Previously on X-Men, the podcast that looks at X-Men comics, movies, shows, characters, and more. I'm Hilary.
I'm Eric.
And we're talking about X-Men 97 again. We've got episode 2, Mutant Liberation Begins.
When?
Now. Right now.
Oh, okay, cool.
It begins now.
Right now.
Mm-hmm.
About time.
I mean, we've been waiting, but I guess, yeah. This one came to Disney Plus on March 2024.
Wow.
Was directed by Chase Conley and written by Bo DeMaio.
Yeah.
I found a lot of this episode and then the next few episodes. I was trying to decide if they were meshing different storylines together and trying to make them into one, and then you'll have to clear things up for me. But we start with a classic disaster. We're at Coney Island? Is it Coney Island?
That sounds right.
There's a Ferris wheel, and someone's trapped in the Ferris wheel, and oh no, can we get to the people to rescue them? What's going to happen? And everybody's panicking. And all of a sudden, something happens that looks like someone is like grabbing the Ferris wheel with a mutant power, and we pretty quickly discover that this was Magneto, and everyone's like, hang on.
Day.
What is he doing saving humans? What is happening?
Yeah. And we also need to talk about, this is the first example of the intro being basically customizable for the show, because Magneto is now in the intro.
Being a good guy.
We'll see people get removed or added as the show goes on.
Yeah, I think that's a cool feature. I like that.
Yeah.
So Magneto seems to be trying to make a point that he's like turning over a new leaf or whatever, trying to be kind of visible doing that. He's on the news, and Cyclops is watching the news, I guess, back at the mansion, and he's down again because, well, did the professor not trust me to lead the X-Men? Why did he do this? Why did he let Magneto take over?
Yeah, it was the previous episode where Jean was making the case that they should leave, but this is the episode where it's kind of brought up that he didn't leave the X-Men to Cyclops because he wanted Cyclops to live a normal life.
Yeah, that's easy interpretation that mostly Jean comes to. And I think he had sort of settled that he would. I don't think he told anybody, but it felt like he was going to do that. But then as soon as Magneto shows up, he's like, no, I'm not leaving.
I'm never leaving.
This guy in charge. So now he's decided to stay, but he's also feeling resentful and like sad.
Yeah.
Because he thought that he would be the leader.
Yep. We also, maybe, is this when we see him? We see the guy working, the Friends of Humanity guy working in his little office, like Iron Man 2.
Yeah, we just get some hints of like some more tech happening and the...
Yeah, so there's this guy working on tech while watching the news, and he's unhappy. We see some Friends of Humanity jerks basically looking to off some Morlocks.
Yeah, they've got him pinned down in the sewer. So they went to their home. And
Magneto shows up, and he is ready to punish those friends.
Yes.
The X-Men step in and are like, no, you can't do that. And he's like, oh, I was just kidding.
To like kill them, yeah.
Yeah. Magneto tells Leech that he'll never have to be afraid again.
Yes. And we pretty quickly see the different philosophy that Magneto feels about dealing with the Morlocks that the X-Men have not so much.
Yeah, the X-Men are just like, yeah, you stay here. You live in the sewers. You're sewer people. We get it.
You guys are gross, and we want you to be safe, but not, like, visible so much.
Right. And Magneto's like, no, they're going to Genosha, which is something we haven't seen, because last time we saw Genosha, it was Slave Island.
Yeah.
And last time we saw it, it was during the Magneto Sanctuary episode where he was bringing mutants up to Asteroid M. Or maybe the last time we saw Genosha was the very last episode of the 90s show where he was Hey, okay, but when we actually see what Genosha is, it will be very different than what we have seen. And I guess I'll talk more about that when we get to that episode. But yeah, he's sending the Morlocks off to Genosha to live a better life. Which the X-Men were like, no, They live in the
And
sewer, and sometimes we visit them during Christmas.
As is proper.
That's it.
He sends them some serious shade, too, because, like, when he comes back to the mansion, they're all in the kitchen or whatever, the dining room, I think, and are talking about what's the deal with Xavier putting Magneto in charge and all that stuff. But then when he comes back from dealing with the Morlocks, he's like, yeah, so I thought we could use some of the immense funds that are available to you from Xavier's, wealth to actually help the Morlocks. I thought maybe we could help the Morlocks instead of ignoring them. I thought maybe that would be a fun thing to do. So he says that right to their faces.
Yeah, that's how he says it.
I thought Rogue's voice was a little better this episode. Maybe she's kind of settling in.
Maybe. I've said my piece on the voices for now.
She calls Magneto Eric when they're talking about him behind his back, sort of in passing. And it's just sort of a bit of a drop, like maybe something's going on here, but that's it. It's just a quick little hint.
Yes, and he is also wearing his 80s costume.
Oh.
He's changed from the classic Jim Lee, well, I guess not classic Jim Lee, but the classic red outfit in general. But yeah, he's in that purple outfit that has the big M on it now.
Yeah, I don't love it.
Yeah, that was very of its time, but it was the one he wore when he was working more on the side of the Angels and when he was the headmaster of the New Mutants. And it was also the outfit he wore during the Trial of Magneto story, so it's comic accurate for that.
Fits right in.
Is that the first new costume? The first costume change we've seen then? They were all in their classic...
I think it's later that we see some more pop in.
Yeah, so this is the beginning of them moving away from the Jim Lee era costumes, which, they did in the 90s show because that was the look of the X-Men. That was what everybody was thinking of that stuff. But then as the 90s progressed and the costumes changed, the cartoon never did. This one has more money and flexibility with that. So Magneto is the first of a couple of costume changes.
Yeah, and I like that about this show, when they do the costume changes, it always feels like there's like a character growth reason for them to change. Like they aren't just all of a sudden like, I guess I'll try this. Like for him, it's sort of like he's changing his thing, but he's also being very purposeful about how he's seen. And so I think he's like making that choice to be visibly different. And then later on, other things happen similar to that. So upstairs in the mansion, we have Jean and Storm having kind of a little sister time. She's like, I don't know if she's putting away laundry or something. Friends. Yeah, this was a bit of a jump, but I did like it. Like, I wish this had been more of a thing all along.
Well, it's not. Yeah, it's not X-Men 97's fault. Right. It would be the 90s show's fault. And to be fair, they did try to do some hangout time in the 90s cartoon, but this is really the first time that Jean and Storm are acting like sisters.
Yeah, they seem like they're very, very close. And they're,
I mean, they call each other sister.
Yeah. It's sort of a theme in the season. Yeah. Like, they've just decided that this is going to be a thing. And I do like it. I like the two of them being close like that. But in their closeness, Jean finally comes and admits to Storm that secretly in her heart of hearts, she doesn't really want the baby to be a mutant because she doesn't want it to have to go through all of the hardship and stuff that's been a part of their life.
I don't fault her for that.
Yes, and I think Storm handles it really, really well. You just want the best for your baby. Like, it's not a betrayal. You just, But also, we're a family, and if it's a mutant, the baby will still have a family to take care of, and all that, She just kind of
I think it has real world analogies. I mean, we can find out in pregnancy if a child is going to have a deficiency or issues when it's born, and I think everybody wants their baby to be healthy and to be happy and safe. And the idea that something unplanned or out of your control could affect that is very stressful even during the time of pregnancy. So I think silly comic book stuff I don't want my baby to have the power to move through walls, but it has it's a normal fear, I think, just, transplanted to this. And yeah, I don't think it's crazy for Jean. Because in the end of the first season, when Scott asks Jean to marry him, she says, but if we have children, they'll be mutants just like us and they'll face all this. And Scott was the one who's like, I wouldn't want it any other way, which is a crazy thing to say. But it does mean, like, way back in 1993 or whenever the first season ended, Jean was already somebody who was concerned about having kids who have to deal with the same crap. So it's consistent with how she's been.
Yeah, that is cool. So after that, they had their little sister time. Then we see Rogue and Magneto in his office. So she's come to talk to him just sort of because we're discovering she knows him from before. And so she's just sort of trying to talk to him as a colleague and as a friend when everybody else is sort of scared of him or whatever. And just throughout that conversation, we get more hints of the depth of their history together. And at the end of it, he tries to take off her glove, I think is what it is. And she pulls away. And so you're like, what's going on?
She says, doesn't she say something like that never happened, or that
was a long time ago and it won't happen again, something like that. If you know that that's a thing in the comics, that they have a romance, then it's like, whoa! And if you don't know, then it's like, what's happening? This is dramatic.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you don't know, it does have a very, I think you might have even more of the, whoa, what?
Yeah.
Because it's not something that you would have seen in any other X-Men media outside of the comics. This is the first time, it's been in the show or movies or anything. So,
is this the first thing, do you think, the first, like, plot point that is pulling entirely from the comics and not touching with anything from the first series?
Yeah, this is the episode that really starts pulling from the comics a lot of stuff that the 90s show never got to.
Yeah, it feels like the beginning of a bit of a flood of such things that we'll get to as we go.
Hey, you're a Rogue fan. How do you feel about Rogue Magneto romance stuff?
I think I've maybe read like one thing that actually has that in it. I don't love it. Like, I just don't particularly care. Like, I'm not like, ew, gross, but it's like, whatever. I don't.
People usually go back to the Jim Lee issue where Rogue is in the Savage Land in like right,
yeah, that's the one. That's what I
in a jungle bikini, basically hanging out with Magneto. But really, it's Age of Apocalypse had them as a couple. And when Age of Apocalypse ended...
right, okay.
Yeah, when Age of Apocalypse ended, people wanted a lot of that status quo stuff to go into the main universe, even though it didn't really connect. So, they brought in Joseph, who was supposed to be a young Magneto in the comics, but he ended up being a clone, but they kind of had him and Rogue interacting because it was a younger version. And then in the mid-aughts, they really kind of went for it. And now we've moved on from it because they're married now.
I feel like a lot of it is about she can touch him and therefore wants to have a romance with him. And I feel like it's never quite as subtle as I want it to be. Like, because I think that's a very interesting concept, like the idea of like being attracted to someone because you could actually touch them when you can't touch anybody else. But without going really deep into it, it ends up making her seem super shallow. So I don't know how I love it.
Anyway, now begins the trial of Magneto because Val Cooper and a bunch of cops show up.
Well, it's UN military. I don't know. They're just people with guns who work for the UN in whatever capacity. And they bring a bunch of helicopters and land on the lawn. And Magneto is ready to fight them.
One thing that we haven't talked about, I don't think I really wrote notes on it, is that during that talk where he's like, I've used the vast resources we have to send the Morlocks to Genosha and everything, the X-Men are basically to his face debating on if they can trust Magneto.
Right.
And Magneto's like, Charles did. And they're like, blah, blah, blah. And Storm, is kind of the voice of reason that says, you have to understand, you've been our enemy, trust is earned, we're going to have to get there.
Right.
And Magneto in the first half of this episode is very like, no, trust me now. And Rogue and Storm are like, no, you do have to put the work in first. And Magneto's like, huh. But Val Cooper says you're under arrest and we've got plastic guns. And Magneto's like, huh, you got plastic helicopter blades? And is threatening to do some damage with that.
Yeah, he lifts up the helicopters and has like the blades coming in towards everybody, which I think is cool because Val just stands there locked, just looking at him. Like, she's not even looking at the helicopters. She's just like, yeah, okay, here we are.
And that's where Magneto is like, if I turn myself in, will I receive a fair trial or whatnot? And so he goes in, and he's doing that basically to earn the X-Men's trust.
Right.
In that, he's like, look, I am different, I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we begin the trial of Magneto. Because doesn't he say, like, am I to believe this will be a fair trial, not like a kangaroo court kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
We do the whole trial of Magneto where he's there in his handcuffs and his purple outfit, and everybody's protesting outside, and everybody's like, "You've done this," and it's this stuff is always kind of silly because we're supposed to apply like real world litigation to somebody like Magneto.
Mm-hmm.
He has been a mutant terrorist in the past, though. To be fair, cartoon Magneto hasn't really done anything.
Yeah, I guess we haven't seen him do things.
Sanctuary was the big one.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he was going to send missiles.
Yeah. They talk about him, like with Asteroid M, they talk about him like threatening to...
Yeah.
Don't they talk about him threatening to drop it on the Earth or something?
Yeah, well, he was like, don't come at us.
Anyway, they do treat him as like a very intense...
Yeah.
like foe of humanity. But I think that they do a pretty good job in the show right now balancing everybody's like the time that we're all in right now in like social, political, the status quo right now, because you can sort of sense that as much as they want to convict Magneto, they're also super aware of the need to deal with the mutant situation. And I think that even as they're at the very beginning being like, how do you answer for this and all this stuff, there does feel like there's something among the UN people that's like, can we convict him of anything? And like, what are the options and what are the implications for this moment when we're trying to make sure that like humans and mutants don't all erupt into some crazy war?
Yeah. And so basically January 6th happens.
Basically. Oh, but you skipped over Magneto's awesome speech.
Yeah.
He has a very good speech that I think starts to kind of pave a path forward where like he's like, yes, I did these horrible things, but I did them in response to people trying to wipe out my people. Like how do we get how do we resolve this?
And it should be said, the 90s cartoon, when we looked into Magneto's past, it was always very like, it's a generic kind of war. He lost his loved ones and family to war because they were different, but it was very apolitical. Is that the word?
I think so, yeah.
He could have been anyone. It could have been anything. But X-Men 97 is very much like, it was the Holocaust. Mm-hmm. He was Jewish.
Yeah, and he has... don't they show him have the tattoo with the numbers on his arm?
He's got the number on his arm again, so it's...
That's like a very clear, this is what happened to Magneto.
And so then January 6th happens, and... I mean,
it has to be an intentional parallel, right?
Oh, it is. Absolutely. I mean, they stormed this building, and it's January 6th.
But we hear, at some point, that the Executioner, before he really does his thing, we sort of hear him amping up that group as sort of a distraction for his real plan. So he's like getting everybody riled up to like burst in there, and then he's going to do some...
Yeah, but the Executioner doesn't excuse the fact that it is just Jan Sixers going into... oh
yes, they're very happy to do it.
Yeah, they're like, hey, finally, an excuse! Let's do something so stupid!
But my point is that it's not even the real plan. It's like only a distraction.
Well, yeah, once again, Jan Sixers are just being used
They're just pawns.
Just being manipulated by people who have self-serving plans.
Yeah.
Who's all there? It's basically all of them but Wolverine and Jean, right?
Yeah, Wolverine and Jean are back at the mansion, but everybody else, I think, is at the UN.
Yeah, and so the X-Men have to take that on and everything. And yes, Jean goes into labor while this is happening.
Yes, great timing.
And it is a very funny moment where Jean says, "He's here!" And Wolverine goes, "Who? Apocalypse?" And has his claws out. And Jean says, "No, baby!" And throws the keys at him. And he doesn't even catch them. He's just like,
And so you have a classic, the guy freaking out about getting her to the hospital. That's a whole thing.
Not any guy. I think some of the other guys would have Beast would have handled it well, being a doctor and everything. I think
Beast would have handled it fine.
I think this is just one of those Wolverine is not in his element here.
And speaking of elements, we have back at the UN, Cyclops has another cool moment where he's just like, "Oh, there's a disaster. Okay, well, here we go. The X-Men can handle this. Yep. This is what we do," and gets them going.
The Executioner comes in, and he's shooting at Magneto. Oh, and the X-Men have to leave because Rogue and Cyclops have to leave because Jean is having the baby, which leaves...
Yes, I question this decision.
You question it?
I do, because, yes, it is very important for Cyclops to be there when his child is born. Yeah. But, this is a mass of anti-human lunatics.
Anti-mutant.
Physically violating, attacking the UN.
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like maybe it's important for him and their literally strongest person to be there. But,
to be fair, they are leaving Magneto and Storm behind, which... are two powerhouses you would think could handle any situation.
Yeah, I guess if you're just thinking, look, a bunch of human idiots, you guys can handle this. I guess that's true.
They get to the hospital, and the doctor... there's a whole thing where Wolverine is driving, on the sidewalk to get Jean to the hospital, and Jean, while having a baby, trying not to have the baby right there... is cyclically moving these things, and it kind of feels like Wolverine's causing her more stress.
Yes, definitely.
But also, it kind of shows the fact that, it's one of those things where when we see it, the doctor has kind of a point, because as Jean is going into labor, she's unintentionally tearing the roof off the car with her psychic powers.
Yeah, that's not great.
And so the doctor at the hospital refuses to admit them and deliver the baby because of that case, saying, you mutants' powers are unpredictable, and who knows what would happen while you're going into labor or with this baby. And the X-Men get very angry. And I don't know if do you feel like this is Cyclops crossing a line where he tells Rogue to steal his knowledge of having a baby?
Yes. I feel like it's very obvious that the doctor is being bigoted about this. A real doctor would be like, well, of course I need to help this person who is in need of help, and we can do, we can take precautions. I can take her outside, solve the problem. Don't just be like, you can't have care because of this difficult situation. So yes, he's being awful. But I do like the quickness with which Cyclops is like, fine, don't. I'll just have my mutant friend here steal your brain power. And she pretty quickly, faster than I would think, is like, okay, yeah, I guess I'll do that. So
yeah, it feels like another intentional step of them leading Cyclops to that more, what did we say, zealous state that he was in?
Well, he's
last decade.
Over it at this point. Yeah. We see a lot early on with him just towing the line with Xavier and being like, yes, we need to work with humans. We need to, be slow with them and show them we can be good so that then they'll accept us. And in this series, it's very much pushing him over the edge of you know what? They hate us. I'm going to hate them too.
Yep.
I'm just going to do what I need to do to take care of my people.
So the Executioner at the UN fires at Magneto.
He has some fancy gun that he's been working on.
Yes, it's based off of he's been taking different tech from the Sentinels and stuff. And he shoots at Magneto, Storm jumps in the way, and we realize that was a power neutralizer or power nullifier, and now Storm doesn't have her powers, and she's very upset. She says like she can't feel the breeze.
Yeah, it's a very affecting moment, and I feel like the fact that it's her kind of adds a layer, because like anybody else, there's just something about the way her power seems to function that it would like she's has this awareness of like the things around her, and then it's just gone all of a sudden, and it's just very affecting.
Yeah, and the voice actress does a really good job at it. And Magneto is like, enough.
Oh my gosh. He is so pissed.
He lifts up the UN and the Executioner on the UN's floor and takes them up into space, and is very angry and does this whole speech, and he puts his foot on the Executioner, who in this situation is very out of his element. He can't move. You know, Magneto's like, I could squash you like a bug. And he's talking all this stuff. And basically he's saying, Charles Xavier trusted me. Don't make me disappoint him.
Yeah.
Don't have me let him down.
He's even in this moment, he's like fighting his impulse to just
drop them from
them
space.
all.
Yeah.
He's like, I decided that I was going to do this, that I was going to do what Charles wanted me to do. And you can see him like working through it, and he's like, but he needs to show them what will happen if he is pushed back to being a villain. Like, it takes him nothing. Like, you don't see any effort happening in the he does. He has picked them all up and is holding them in outer space, or high orbit at least. And he's just talking very calmly, you know, he's very in control of the situation.
Yeah. I can't decide if the music that's playing during this is intentionally evoking the music in X-Men 2. There's the scene in X-Men 2 where he goes to Stryker's, you know, evil Cerebro. And instead of freeing Xavier, he moves all the parts around. And the music is very like,
and he's going to target all the humans.
And this scene, the music felt very evocative of that.
Oh, that would be cool, yeah.
Anyways, he tells them, you know, that don't make me disappoint you or them, and brings them all back down, and he's pardoned. And that is going to create an issue for President Kelly in later episodes, we'll see. But now that Storm is depowered by this nullifier aimed at someone else, she's now partaking in the life-death storyline from the comics.
So we're bringing in yet another new storyline.
Yeah, so what did we bring in? We brought in the Nathan birth, we brought in
the trial of Magneto.
The trial of Magneto, the beginning of Genosha, the romance of Magneto and Rogue, the Executioner, life death. I mean, that's a lot of plots, and a lot of these
We're not even done yet.
Yeah, and a lot of these this is going to be my biggest gripe about the show, and we'll talk about that when we get to the conclusion of Storm's life-death arc a little bit more. It's just this show is almost afraid that it's going to get canceled after the first season, so it's trying to shove as many storylines in every episode it can, even though some of these storylines in the comics lasted half a decade more.
Yeah. I think it's the biggest weakness of the entire season.
Yeah, Storm was powerless for a long time in the 80s and went through different changes where she was also a kid at one point. And so, you know, that was a big deal for her not to have her power, but still leading the X-Men. And it wasn't really seen as her having a weakness in a lot of ways. But yeah, I mean, the trial of Magneto, I guess that is an episode, but that could also be a whole episode, whereas this, it is like 10 minutes of this episode.
Yeah, everything ends up feeling rushed. They don't get to do all of the storylines justice because they're cramming them all together. Yeah, it doesn't work.
And I think it doesn't seem... This is more in retrospect. Like, this episode, I think it's because it's beginning a lot of plots.
Yeah.
But a lot of these plots will get fixed very quickly.
But even at the time when I first watched them, I remember thinking, like, this is a lot to be.
This is a busy episode, yeah. And I mean, I guess it is more modern storytelling than the 90s, which is like, bad guy introduced, personal problems introduced, personal problems, bad guy kind of interact, personal problems and bad guy resolved.
Yeah.
This
See,
show is...
I like that pacing.
Okay.
I'm very old, so I guess I prefer that pacing.
Anyway, Jean has the baby. They decide to name him Nathan. They take him home. We find out Storm has left.
Yeah, she leaves a very beautiful letter saying goodbye.
Oh man, is this a long-winded letter goodbye, Jean? Because they're sisters.
Lovely.
It's so much. But the thing is, I think Storm overreacts very quickly.
It's really fast. And I think that's another casualty of the pacing.
I would have wanted another episode of Storm grieving with her friends and family.
Right, yeah.
And them all saying, you're still an X-Men, you're still part of this team. And then, like, Storm realizing it's harder to put that into practice than it is to put that into feelings. And then she decides to leave. But this, as soon as she doesn't have power, she's like, bye!
Yeah, it's definitely like a knee-jerk kind of a reaction. I think they give her, like, the letter gives decent enough reasons. Like, she feels like she's human now, and they're just all on different paths, and it's better to just kind of cut ties. But it's also very clearly an irrational decision. Like, this is an emotional, traumatized
It's just,
brain.
we don't see her interact with any of the X-Men like this. And that's very wasted, I think.
You know what's a moment that I really like with this power loss thing? When before she leaves, when she's in her room, and a thunderclap goes.
Oh,
and she's startled
lightning
by it.
strikes, and she's surprised because she doesn't expect it.
I just think it's such a really well done scene, because it doesn't startle her, and then she's like, oh, I didn't even notice that was, you know what I mean? There's no over-explaining. It's just this, like, poignant thing that you just see exactly what's going on with her. I like that. But then, yes, she does leave. She leaves her message. And then when Jean is reading it, we go through use it as kind of a montage thing. You hear the voiceover of Jean, and then you sort of see different moments in the mansion happening. Like, you see Rogue deciding to touch Magneto's hand, which feels like the beginning of something momentous. You see Morph kind of bringing Wolverine out of his shell by pretending to be a Sabretooth. And
because he throws beer at him, and he throws Wolverine's grumpy in a chair in the tree because Jean had the baby. Morph throws beer, and Wolverine's like, leave me alone. And then he turns into Sabretooth, and Wolverine's like, let's fight, let's wrestle.
It's got kind of like a puppy vibe, the way that they
go at each other. It might be a little bit more homoerotic in Morph's feelings towards that.
Maybe.
We also see that Gambit realizes there's something going on between Rogue and Magneto.
Yes, he sees her leave his office or something while he's like hiding around the corner, and it looks very sad.
And so Jean's reading the letter to everybody, and they're like, "Aw." And then there's a knock at the door.
No, she's back.
Yep. And they open it, because Morph even says she'll be back in no time. Yeah. And then the knock is like, wow, look at that. And they open it, and Jean is at the door asking for help and faints.
But Jean was right there.
Uh-oh.
Dun, dun, dun. And that's the cliffhanger.
That's the cliffhanger.
I liked this episode, especially the first time I watched it when I didn't know where everything was going. I think I really, really enjoyed this. Like, it's the first one that I feel like really starts to layer in a lot of drama and interpersonal stuff that really makes you feel the difference of this season from the previous.
Well, the first episode was very much look, the 90s X-Men cartoon is back. Were you a fan of the 90s cartoon, but you wanted a little bit more adult? Well, here it is. But the second episode is more of the thesis statement for what the show is going to be going forward. Like, we are taking inspiration. It's the same universe, and we're taking inspiration for the 90s cartoon, but we have we're going in a direction the 90s cartoon couldn't.
Yeah.
And it also shows, like, hey, were there comic storylines in the 80s and 90s that happened that the 90s cartoon never touched? We're gonna do them all in record time.
All of them.
Yep. We're gonna do everything.
If it's a major plot point, if it's a character thing, anything that's dramatic, it's gonna be in here.
So I feel like this is the episode that kind of won me over a little bit more, because my complaint was when they announced X-Men 97, I was like, I'd rather just get a new X-Men cartoon.
Mm-hmm.
And this episode kind of says, like, yeah, we're going to try to do both. And the benefit of it being X-Men 97 is that we don't have to do the Sanctuary storyline. We don't have to do the introduction of the Sentinels. We don't have to do Phoenix and Dark Phoenix. All that stuff has been done. So we can do other storylines that you haven't seen. We can do the Trial of Magneto. We can do Life Death. And we can bring in the Executioner. Yeah. I mean, I definitely can see why people might like the first episode more than this episode, if they're, they want that more 90s feeling. But I think this is the one that piqued my interest a little bit more. It's like, okay, where are we going with all this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same.
I'm a little bummed because, I mean, I guess the Executioner is only so useful in the comics as well. Like, he's never... I don't even know if you can say he's a B-level villain. He's kind of a habitual failure of a villain. But I like the concept. I always kind of like a high-tech, mutant-aimed Punisher type of character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he's always so overpowered. He can't really be an enemy to the whole team. And so I guess it's very comic accurate that he does one thing and then is easily beaten. I just kind of hope he'd done a little bit more, but cool that he got in it. And we're going to see some more villains coming up soon.
Yeah. Oh, and we didn't even mention we had a couple cameos in the UN fight because Psylocke showed up and Lady Deathstrike.
No, it's
coming to the rescue.
Wait, no, Hilary. It's Morph. All these cameos are Morph, so there's going to be a cameo via Morph in the next episode, and I'll kind of complain about it when we get to there. But
right.
I think this is also, like, the first episode's like, yeah, the X-Men are back. It's going to be fun. Look, Magneto has been gifted everything by Xavier. This is going to be so ridiculous. And then this one is like, no, it's actually going to be stressful. This is going to be a stressful show.
Rest.
Because I don't think the first episode was very stressful.
No, yeah, it was more on the fun side.
And this episode is like, no, we're actually gonna, as soon as, the January 6th analogy starts happening, like, oh, we are going to be doing things a little bit more serious here.
Gonna be more serious, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you like this episode is what you said.
I did, yes.
Yeah.
And more so initially.
So, yeah, when you first watched this and they started hinting at the Magneto Rogue romance stuff, what was your, initial gut reaction to realizing the show was going that direction?
I think whenever they did something like that, they very noticeably included Gambit noticing stuff with it. And so I just sort of was like, okay, so maybe they'll kind of play with this for a little bit, but it'll all be, furthering the Rogue and Gambit relationship. So I was like, I'm cool with this.
So, all right. So you weren't like, this.
No. I mean, I don't think so. I say that very confidently, but I don't remember super my initial reaction. But it did always feel like clear to me narratively that they were.
It was just for Rogue and Gambit.
Take it back around. Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. All right. Well, we'll see how that plays out in a couple episodes.
Yeah. So the next one that we're doing is Fire Made Flesh. And I wonder what that could be referencing.
Yeah, I wonder.
We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you to Prophetic Music for our theme song. Previously on X-Men is brought to you by the Radio Meanwhile Network. Other shows on the network include This Endorian Life, 90s Music Got Me Like, and 9021 Here We Go. Follow us on Facebook and be sure to follow the network on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads for info on all of our shows. Please rate, subscribe, or share the show wherever you get your podcasts, and see you next time.
And also with you. I mean, bye.